64 Trump collection. I think it's like Waku Waku Alice in Wonderland or something like that. But this is a cutesy Alice in Wonderland card game on the Nintendo 64. And one thing that's kind of distinct about it is that it uses entirely almost 2D assets, which is, not very common on the Nintendo 64. And it creates this almost like Paper Mario kind of aesthetic to it. And it's a very fun package overall. And it has, while I'm sure nothing, super like out of this world, a story that it uses to kind of like string together all of its different card games and stuff. And so I think it's a really fun package that, gives you a story reason to try a variety of different card games, or at least kind of interact with them. I know I haven't played a ton of card games in my life, so a lot of these experiences are generally new to me, even if, they are time-honored card games that people have been playing for, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of years. So, but yeah, being based in the Alice in Wonderworld land, it definitely follows that story. I will be honest with you, I don't actually really know the Alice in Wonderland story, but Alice seems to chase a rabbit down a tree hole or something and ends up in this world where she, is faced with a variety of challenges, and maybe the most iconic one of them, right, is her drinking something that shrinks her down, basically. Most of what I know about Alice in Wonderland comes from Kingdom Hearts or whatever, right? So, but, it's all these little set pieces that I'm guessing are based off the fairy tale folklore thing. I just don't know how accurate it is. And all of it's done in this very like super cute Paper Mario kind of look to it. And, Alice is this little girl like with a sprite that kind of bounces around, and she's like really energetic. And, every time she goes around, she's like kind of conveying these problems she has to people. And it's all paired with like very simple dialogue, and it all has like these very light jokes that even when using like machine translation to kind of translate it, you can kind of catch on to, what's happening here. If the king is saying the same line over and over and over again, it's kind of like delivered for comedic effect and things like that. And it has all this very like children's book kind of kids anime kind of humor and feel to it, like a Doraemon or something like that. I say that not having watched Doraemon, so I don't know why I'm using that as an example. But every problem in this world is solved by playing card games. And so it leans into that humor a bit where like, by the end of the game, Alice is like, yes, I know. The only way we can solve this problem is I beat you at a card game kind of thing, right? So it's definitely self-aware in that kind of thing. So it's a variety of card games. I don't want to give the full list here, but, it's got like Old Maid, something called like Page One. I don't really even know what that is. And Speed. And I've played a little bit of Speed before and things like that. So kind of these classical, card games based around, the traditional, I don't know what we'd call them, face set of like, hearts, clovers, 1 through 10, king, queen, jack, and things like that. There's not many customized cards in this, and it's very traditional cards based. I don't really think there's any like specialized rules to these or anything. Each of these games are different, and they might have different rule sets, but I think they're anything specific to this game. So really what you're coming into here is for the presentation, and so each of these characters that you meet in this story are your competitors in these games, and they have little character portraits in the game, and they make little facial expressions and have these little vocalizations that happen, when they lose or win. And there's also like really weird, like specialized animations that come out of nowhere. Like one stage just has like a submarine come out and like launch missiles at you when you get knocked out of the game. And it's like weirdly elaborate for what it is. But, the game itself is all very straightforward. So it's all about like glamorizing it up. There's basically total of it like 8 chapters as a whole. And so while it's not a very long game, I think it'll probably take you you probably could do it in less than an hour if you beat every game the first time, every time. Elements of luck play into these games as well. So, you're going to lose sometimes, and sometimes that's going to be because you don't understand the rules. It's all in Japanese, so I had to kind of like figure out what was happening because I didn't necessarily know the rule sets for all these games. But, I think by the end of it, 1 to 2 hours is a pretty reasonable length of time to be playing this. And so beating each of these are awarded with, these little cutscenes as these characters, kind of play around in these cutscenes and have these little quips between each other. And ultimately the ending has, this credit sequence with this like really nice kind of, I don't know if hand-drawn art is the right way to put it, but, it is like these 2D portraits that are really detailed and kind of celebrate all the characters that you met along the way. And it has a lot of like this kind of like ragtime kind of soundtrack to it with a lot of like pianos with like this very like, upbeat kind of sound to it. If you ever seen like an old-timey like 1920s stage play kind of thing, that's kind of the soundtrack here, and it all fits very well. And I think the big thing is that the general package of the story mode of this just all works really well together, and the presentation just is really really consistent throughout. And so I think if you're into this kind of like more cutesy anime Alice in Wonderworld aesthetic, you'll be really happy with how this game looks and plays out. There are some pretty massive frame rate issues here, which is really weird because the game doesn't seem like it should have that. But, you know, at the end of the day, none of it really matters in the context of what this game is, other than just if you personally don't like frame rate issues and things like that. I was able to overlook it without like any problem. One additional thing to this game that's actually kind of interesting as well is that once you finish the story, or actually you can do it before you finish the story as well, there's this separate mode where you can just play these games kind of without the story element to it. And the ones that come from the main story does maintain the presentation of those. But then there's like solitaire games as well, and these have completely different aesthetics where it's like astrology based for some reason. And then there's also like blackjack and I think poker, and those just like have slot machine aesthetics, like digital slot machine aesthetics for some reason. And so it's like this really weird clash of looks, but you know, this is all just kind of like the side stuff where it's just like, hey, if you just want to plop this game in and play some random gambling games, here you go, kind of thing. And there's also like some fortune telling games and things like that are a little bit more in the style of the game itself, with like this really big sprite for Alice as like these little night cards dance around as you pick your fortune and stuff. But, you know, a lot of these are just, you know, either fairly shallow experiences with like the fortune telling thing, or in the case of the other gambling games, you know, they are what they are, right? If you want a card game on the 64, you know, I think that side mode perfectly fits everything you need in that regard. But, you know, from today's perspective, you know, where you have all these kind of card games at the fingertips on your phone or on whatever device you're using, right? Maybe needing a Nintendo 64 to provide these to you is not necessarily as important. I think that just highlights even more how important that the presentation is what really matters with this game. And so if you want to have this like narrative-based game that is, you know, taking you around these different card games and stuff and just presenting them in like fun and exciting ways and just having these little cutesy dialogue interactions between all these different characters, I think this game does a really great job of achieving that, and that seems to be kind of the main focus of this game. So, you know, may not rival the likes of like an Ocarina of Time or Mario 64 on the system, but I think it does a really good job with what it set out to achieve in creating this kind of holistic story-based world around Alice in Wonderland and playing cards.